The massive space station hung in the darkness like a giant metal flower. Its silver petals stretched out in all directions, each one bigger than Earth's moon. This was Nexus Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council, where the most important decisions in the universe were made. Ambassador Tejo walked through the long corridors, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, looking plain next to the other beings around him. A group of Aquari flowed past him like living water, their forms shifting and changing as they moved. Their thoughts connected to each other in ways humans could never understand. Tejo had been Earth's representative for 2 years now, but he still felt like an outsider. Every other species in the galaxy could speak to each other through their minds. They shared thoughts, feelings, and ideas without saying a word. Humans were the only ones who had to use their mouths to talk. The emergency alarm rang through the station. Red lights flashed along the walls, and beings from dozens of worlds began moving toward the main council chamber. Tejo followed them, knowing he would spend the next few hours watching conversations he could not join. The council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of seats rose up in circles around a central platform. Each seat was designed for a different type of being. Some held creatures made of pure energy. Others supported beings of metal and crystal. Tejo found his small human seat near the back. Council leader Vex 9, a tall being made of flowing silver metal, stood at the center. When he spoke, his voice came through speakers, but Tejo knew most of the council was also hearing his thoughts, directly. "We face a crisis that threatens the peace of our galaxy," Vex 9 announced. "The Vorthak homeworld shows signs of dangerous activity." A hologram appeared above the platform, showing a beautiful planet covered in crystal cities. The structures looked like giant gems, catching and reflecting light in brilliant colors. But something was wrong. Many of the cities were dark, and strange energy readings pulsed across the planet's surface. "The Vorthak have been members of our community for over 3,000 years, Vex 9 continued. "They are one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, but their recent communications have become disturbing." Another hologram appeared, this one showing a Vorthak representative. The being looked like a walking crystal sculpture, beautiful but alien. Its body was made of clear, blue-tinted material that seemed to glow from within. Light patterns moved across its surface like thoughts made visible. Tejo watched as the other council members began their silent discussion. He could see their faces change, showing concern, fear, and anger, but he heard nothing. The telepathic conversation flowed around him like a river, and he was a stone in the middle, untouched by the current. He activated his translation device, hoping to catch some spoken words, but there were none. The device could only translate languages that used sound. It was useless here. Minutes passed. The silent debate continued. Tejo watched the Vorthak hologram carefully. Something about the way the crystal being moved caught his attention. The light patterns on its body flickered in ways that seemed familiar, though he could not say why. Finally, Council Leader Vex 9 spoke aloud again. "The Vorthak telepathic broadcasts have become aggressive. They demand territory from neighboring systems. They speak of expansion and conquest. This is not the peaceful species we have known." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, though most of the real discussion still happened in silence. Tejo felt frustrated. He wanted to ask questions, to understand what was really happening, but there was no way for him to join the conversation. A new hologram appeared, showing Vorthak ships near the borders of other systems. The ships looked different from the peaceful trading vessels Tejo remembered. These were larger, darker, with strange modifications that made them look threatening. "The Corvan Empire reports Vorthak vessels approaching their mining colonies," Vex 9 said. "The Luminal Collective has detected unusual energy signatures from Vorthak space. All evidence points to a fundamental change in their civilization." Tejo leaned forward in his seat. He had met Vorthak traders before, during his first year as ambassador. They had been quiet, thoughtful beings who spoke little but listened much. The idea that they had suddenly become aggressive seemed wrong somehow. The council chamber filled with more silent discussion. Tae-ho could see the fear on many faces. The galaxy had been at peace for centuries. The idea that one of the oldest species might be turning hostile was terrifying. A representative from the Aquari delegation spoke aloud, her voice like water flowing over stones. Perhaps the humans have insight into this matter. They observe behavior differently than we do. All eyes turned to Tae-ho. He felt his heart rate increase as hundreds of alien gazes focused on him. He stood slowly, activating his voice translator, so all species could understand him. "I appreciate the question," he said carefully, "but I must admit I cannot participate in your telepathic discussions. I only know what has been spoken aloud. Without access to the full information, I cannot offer meaningful advice." The admission hung in the air like a weight. Several beings made sounds that his translator interpreted as disappointment or sympathy. Tae-ho sat down, feeling more isolated than ever. The council continued its silent debate for another hour. Finally, Vex 9 called for order. "We have reached a decision. The Vorthak system will be placed under quarantine. No ships will be allowed to enter or leave their space until this crisis is resolved. Trade agreements are suspended. Diplomatic contact is limited to emergency channels only." The decision felt wrong to Tae-ho, but he had no way to voice his concerns. The council began to disperse, beings floating, walking, and flowing toward the exits. The emergency was over, at least for now. As Tae-ho prepared to leave, he took one last look at the Vorthak hologram. The crystal being stood motionless, its light patterns dim. But in that dimness, Tae-ho saw something the others had missed. The way the lights flickered reminded him of something human, something universal. It looked like sadness. It looked like fear. It looked like a creature in pain, trying desperately to be understood. But the galaxy had already decided what those lights meant, and Tae-ho, unable to speak their language, could do nothing to change their minds. Dr. Minna stared at the encrypted message on her screen for the third time. The words from Ambassador Tae-ho were simple, but urgent. Something was wrong with the Vorthak situation. The Galactic Council had made their decision too quickly. He needed someone to investigate what was really happening. The research vessel Harmony was small compared to the great ships of other species. It carried only 12 humans and was designed for peaceful exploration, not military action. But it was fast and could go places larger ships could not. Minna had spent 5 years studying how different species communicated without words. She watched their body language, their movements, their behaviors. While other scientists focused on telepathic signals, she studied the things that all living beings did when they felt fear, joy, or pain. She found Captain Dongwu in the ship's small dining area, drinking coffee and reading reports. He was a quiet man who had been exploring space for 15 years. His crew trusted him completely. "Captain, I need to show you something," Minna said, sitting across from him. Dongwu looked up from his tablet. "What is it, Doctor?" Minna activated her portable display and showed him Tae-ho's message. She also pulled up the official Galactic Council reports about the Vorthak crisis. "Look at this data carefully. The Council says the Vorthak are becoming aggressive, but something does not match." Dongwu studied the information. He saw the reports of territorial demands and military buildup, but he also saw what Minna was pointing out. "The timeline is wrong," he said slowly. "Exactly. The Council received the first aggressive message 3 months ago. But look at these trade records. Vorthak ships stopped visiting other systems 4 months ago. They were pulling back before they started sending threatening messages. Engineer Yujin walked into the dining area carrying a toolkit. She was young but brilliant with technology. "Are you two planning something dangerous again?" she asked, with a smile. "Maybe," Dongwu replied. "Yujin, how long would it take us to reach the Vorthak system?" "About 6 days if we push the engines, but Captain, that system is under quarantine. The Council ordered all ships to stay away." Communications Officer Jae-min appeared in the doorway. He was the youngest member of the crew, but he had a gift for understanding different communication methods. "I heard you mention the Vorthak. I have been monitoring their system from long range. Their radio signals are very strange." Minna turned to him quickly. Strange how? They are not sending military communications. Most of their signals are very weak, like emergency distress calls, but our computers cannot translate them properly. Dongwu made his decision. Set course for the Vorthak system. We will stay, outside the quarantine boundary but close enough to observe. I want to know what is really happening there. The Harmony left its research station and began the journey toward Vorthak space. During the 6-day trip, Minna and her team studied everything they could find about Vorthak culture and communication. The Vorthak were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They were made of living crystal that could change color and brightness to show their emotions. For thousands of years, they had been peaceful traders and scholars. They rarely spoke aloud, preferring to communicate through telepathic connections with other species. When the Harmony reached the edge of Vorthak space, what they found surprised everyone. Long-range sensors showed that most of the crystal cities on the homeworld were dark. Only a few areas still glowed with the beautiful lights that Vorthak settlements were known for. Those are not military formations, Yujin said, studying the sensor data. It looks like most of the population has moved to just a few locations. Jamin monitored the communication channels. I am picking up signals, but they are very weak. The patterns are unlike anything in our database. Minna watched the visual feed from their telescopes. She could see Vorthak ships moving slowly around their homeworld, but they were not acting like a military fleet. Their movement seemed random, almost confused. Captain, I request permission to make contact, she said. Dongwu considered this carefully. The quarantine order specifically forbids contact, but we are not technically inside their space. Very well, but keep it brief. Jamin opened a communication channel using basic radio signals. He sent a simple mathematical sequence that all spacefaring species recognized as a peaceful greeting. The response came immediately. The screen filled with swirling patterns of light and color. Beautiful crystalline sounds accompanied the visual display, but the translation computers could make no sense of it. It looks like they are trying to communicate, Yujin said. But our systems cannot understand their method. Minna watched the patterns carefully. She had seen similar displays from Vorthak traders, but these were different. The colors were darker, the movements more frantic. Play it again, but slower. As the recording played at half speed, Minna began to see something familiar. The way the lights pulsed reminded her of human expressions of distress. The rapid flickering looked like someone breathing heavily when frightened. They are not trying to threaten us, she said quietly. They are trying to ask for help. Jamin was working on his communication equipment when something unexpected happened. A power surge caused his music player to activate, broadcasting a human song through their communication system. The effect on the Vorthak was immediate and dramatic. The chaotic light patterns suddenly became organized and rhythmic. The crystalline sounds began to match the melody of the human music. Did you see that? Minna asked excitedly. They are responding to the emotional content of the music, not the words. For the next hour, they experimented with different types of human music and sounds. The Vorthak responded to each one, their light patterns changing to match the emotional tone. Sad music produced dim, slow patterns. Happy music created bright, quick movements. Finally, they tried something different. Minna recorded herself, speaking in a calm, soothing voice, not using any words but just making comforting sounds like a parent might make to a frightened child. The Vorthak response was overwhelming. The light patterns became steady and warm. The crystalline sounds grew softer and more melodic. For the first time, the patterns seemed to show relief and hope. We found it, Minna whispered. We found a way to talk to them. They communicate, through emotion and feeling, not through words or thoughts. Dongwu smiled for the first time in days. Doctor, I think you may have just prevented a war. But as they continued their observations, a darker picture began to emerge. The Vorthak were not just trying to communicate. They were trying to warn the galaxy about something terrible that was happening to their world, something that the other species, with all their telepathic abilities, could not see or understand, something that only humans, who relied on older and simpler forms of communication, were able to recognize. Dr. Minna worked through the night, trying to understand the complex patterns the Vorthak were showing them. She had filled 3 notebooks with drawings of the light sequences and their meanings. Each color seemed to represent a different feeling. Each movement told part of a story. The story was not good. "Captain, you need to see this," she called to Dongwu as he entered the research lab. On the main screen, she had organized the Vorthak communications into a timeline. The patterns started calm and beautiful 3 months ago. Then they became worried, then frightened. Now they showed pure terror. "What are they afraid of?" Dongwu asked. Minna pointed to a series of dark purple patterns that appeared in every recent message. "This color combination appears whenever they try to show us their homeworld. Watch what happens when I enhance the visual feed from our telescopes." The image of the Vorthak planet appeared on screen. At first, it looked normal. Crystal cities caught starlight and reflected it in brilliant colors. But as Minna adjusted the sensors, something else became visible. Dark patches spread across parts of the planet like a disease. These areas showed no light at all, as if something was consuming the crystal cities from within. Engineer Yujin studied the energy readings. "Captain, those dark areas are not just without power. They are absorbing energy. Whatever is in those zones is pulling in all the light and heat around it." Communications Officer Jamin had been monitoring Vorthak signals all night. He looked tired but excited. "I think I understand something important. The Vorthak send their messages in 2 ways. They use light patterns for basic communication, but they also send telepathic signals like other species." "So why can the other species not understand them?" Minna asked. "Because something is wrong with their telepathic messages. Listen to this." Jamin played an audio recording of translated telepathic signals from 3 months ago. The computer voice was calm and normal, asking about trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Then he played a recent message. The computer voice was harsh and demanding, talking about conquest and territorial expansion. But the words did not match the fearful light patterns they had seen. The telepathic messages are being changed somehow, Minna realized. The Vorthak are sending calls for help, but something is turning them into threats. Over the next 2 days, they worked to solve the mystery. Yujin discovered that the dark areas on the planet were generating strange energy fields. These fields seemed to interfere with telepathic communications, twisting them into different meanings. The breakthrough came when Jamin detected similar energy signatures in space around the Vorthak system. Something was living in the dark between the stars. Something that fed on telepathic energy. "It is like a parasite," Minna explained to the crew. "But instead of living inside a body, it lives inside thoughts and mental connections. The more the Vorthak try to communicate telepathically, the stronger it becomes." The horror of the situation became clear. The Vorthak had discovered this creature months ago. They tried to warn the galaxy through their usual telepathic channels, but the parasite corrupted their messages. The warnings became threats. The calls for help became demands for war. The other species, all connected through the same telepathic network, received only the corrupted messages. They thought the Vorthak had become aggressive and dangerous, but the truth was the opposite. The Vorthak were trying to protect the galaxy by isolating themselves. "That is why they pulled back from other systems," Dongwu said. "They were trying to keep this thing from spreading." Captain Dongwu called an emergency meeting in the ship's conference room. The entire crew gathered around the small table. Maps and data displays covered every surface. "We have a problem that is bigger than just the Vorthak," he began. "If this parasitic entity can corrupt telepathic communications, it can spread to every species in the galaxy. The Aquari, the Corvin, the Luminals, all of them could be infected." Yujin pulled up star charts showing the telepathic network that connected galactic civilizations. If the parasite reaches the main communication hubs, it could control the thoughts of billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. The crew sat in silence, understanding the terrible scope of what they had discovered. The galaxy was in danger, and the only species that could see the truth was humanity, because they were the only ones who could not be infected. "We have to contact Ambassador Tejo," Minna said. The Galactic Council needs to know what is really happening. They will not believe us, Jamin pointed out. We are just humans. We cannot even join their telepathic discussions. Why would they trust our analysis over their own perceptions? Because we are the only ones who can see clearly, Dongwu replied. Our weakness has become our strength. As they prepared their report, they received an unexpected signal. It was coming from the Vorthak homeworld, but it was different from the others. This one was weaker and used only light patterns, no telepathic elements at all. The message was simple but desperate. A young Vorthak was trying to communicate using the most basic visual signals. The light patterns were crude, like a child learning to write. But the meaning was clear. Help us. The darkness grows. Soon it will reach you. The signal repeated over and over, growing weaker each time. Someone on the Vorthak homeworld was using the last of their energy to send this warning, knowing that only beings who could not hear telepathic messages would understand it. Minna felt tears in her eyes as she watched the fading signal. They are sacrificing themselves to warn us. They know we are the only ones who can see the truth. Captain Dongwu made his decision. Jamin, open a channel to Ambassador Taeho, priority encryption. Yujin, prepare all our data for transmission. We are going to tell the galaxy what is really happening, whether they want to hear it or not. As the Harmony prepared to leave the Vorthak system, the crew knew they carried information that could save or doom every telepathic species in the galaxy. The parasitic entity was growing stronger, feeding on the very connections that held galactic civilization together. But humans, the species that had always been outsiders, the ones who could not speak the galaxy's universal language, were the only ones who could fight back, the only ones who could hear the Vorthak's real message through all the corruption and lies, the only ones who understood that sometimes being different was exactly what the universe needed. Ambassador Taeho read the encrypted message from Captain Dongwu 3 times before he fully understood what it meant. His hands shook as he looked at the data files and video recordings the Harmony crew had sent. The Vorthak were not the enemy. They were the victims, but convincing the Galactic Council would be nearly impossible. The telepathic species had already made up their minds based on what they believed they had heard directly from Vorthak thoughts. How could he make them understand that their most trusted form of communication was being used against them? Taeho walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime toward the Emergency Communications Center. He needed to contact Dr. Minna and her team before the Council made any final decisions about military action against the Vorthak system. Meanwhile, aboard the Harmony, Dr. Minna worked frantically to create a way to communicate with the young Vorthak who had sent the warning message. She had named the crystal being Suran, which meant pure in Korean, because the light patterns were so clear and honest. Suran is still sending signals, Communications Officer Jamin reported. But they are getting weaker. I think the parasitic entity is growing stronger on their homeworld. Engineer Yujin was building a special communication device based on everything they had learned about Vorthak emotional language. If we can establish a stable connection with Suran, maybe we can learn more about how to fight this parasite. The breakthrough came when Yujin finished her device. It could convert human speech into light patterns that matched Vorthak emotional communication. More importantly, it could translate Vorthak patterns into words without using any telepathic connections. Dr. Minna spoke into the device, her voice calm and reassuring. Suran, we are friends. We want to help your people. Can you tell us more about the dark entity? The response came as a series of dim light patterns. Yujin's device translated them into words on a screen. The darkness came from deep space. It hides in the empty places between stars. When we tried to warn others, it made our words into lies. How long do you have before it consumes everything? Minna asked. Days, maybe hours. It grows stronger when we use our thoughts to speak. We stopped using mind talk, but it is too late. The darkness already touches the star roads that connect all thinking peoples. Minna felt cold fear. The star roads were what the Vorthak called the telepathic network connecting galactic civilizations. If the parasite had already reached those connections, every telepathic species was in danger. Captain Dongwu received an urgent message from Ambassador Tae-ho. The Galactic Council was planning to send a military fleet to the Vorthak system. Within 48 hours, they believed the Vorthak were preparing to attack neighboring worlds. We have to get back to Nexus Prime, Dongwu decided. We need to present our evidence directly to the Council. But Suran sent another message that changed. Everything cannot wait. The darkness spreads tonight. When moontime comes, it will reach the Great Star Road hub. All thinking peoples will hear only lies. Yujin checked the star charts. Captain, the Great Star Road hub Suran mentioned is the main telepathic relay station in this sector. If the parasite reaches it, the corruption will spread to dozens of star systems in hours. They had no time to return to Nexus Prime. They had to act now. Dr. Minna worked with Suran to understand exactly how the parasitic entity operated. Through careful communication, they learned that the creature was not truly alive in the way most beings understood life. It was more like a living shadow that existed in the spaces between thoughts. It cannot touch minds that do not reach out, Suran explained through light patterns. Your people are safe because you do not speak with mind touch. But you can carry our true words to others. The plan they developed was dangerous but simple. Human ships would position themselves at key points in the telepathic network, acting as clean communication relays. They would receive uncorrupted messages from the Vorthak and translate them into forms that other species could understand without using telepathic connections. Jaemin contacted every human ship in the sector. There were not many, but each one could serve as a communication relay point. We need you to move to these coordinates immediately. You will be helping to save the galaxy from a parasitic infection. Most of the human captains agreed without hesitation, even though they did not fully understand the situation. Humans had always been willing to help others, even at personal risk. Ambassador Tae-ho received detailed instructions from Dr. Minna about how to present the evidence to the Galactic Council. But he faced a seemingly impossible challenge. How do you convince telepathic beings that their telepathy is lying to them? The answer came from Suran, who had learned to communicate in simple visual mathematics that any species could understand. Together with Dr. Minna, they created a presentation that used pure mathematics, visual evidence, and logical proofs that required no telepathic interpretation. As the critical moment approached, human ships took their positions throughout the sector. The Harmony moved closer to the Vorthak homeworld, ready to serve as the primary communication relay. Suran sent one final message before the parasite's influence became too strong. Thank you for hearing our real words. Win or lose, someone finally understood our pain. Ambassador Tae-ho stood before the Galactic Council, holding a simple visual projector. The telepathic species were still receiving corrupted messages that made the Vorthak seem increasingly threatening. Several council members were already calling for immediate military action. Honored members of the council, Tae-ho began. I ask you to consider evidence that cannot be corrupted by telepathic interference. What I am about to show you will prove that we are all in terrible danger, and the Vorthak are not our enemies, but our first line of defense. The presentation began with mathematical proofs showing the energy signatures of the parasitic entity. Then came visual records of the dark patches spreading across the Vorthak homeworld. Finally, recordings of Suran's uncorrupted light pattern communications, translated into multiple languages. The council chamber fell silent as the truth became clear. The Vorthak had been trying to save them all along, but the silence was broken by an emergency alarm. The parasitic entity had reached the main telepathic relay hub. Across the galaxy, telepathic communications began carrying the shadow of corruption. The battle for the minds of civilization had begun, and only the humans stood between the parasite and total victory. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in chaos as emergency alarms rang throughout Nexus Prime. Ambassador Tae-ho watched as telepathic species began receiving corrupted messages from across the galaxy. Their faces showed confusion and fear as their most trusted form of communication turned against them. Council leader Vex 9 struggled to maintain order. His silver metal form flickered with energy discharges as he tried to filter out the telepathic interference. All members, please. Limit telepathic communication immediately. We are experiencing widespread network corruption, but it was too late for some. 3 Aquari representatives collapsed as the parasitic entity invaded their flowing consciousness. Their water-like forms turned dark and began spreading tendrils toward other beings. The luminal collective members dimmed to almost nothing, their energy being drained away. The infection is spreading through direct contact, Tejo announced loudly. Everyone who can hear my voice move away from affected beings immediately. His words cut through the panic because he was the only one speaking normally. Every other species was either corrupted or too afraid to use their telepathic abilities. Suddenly, the human who could not join their mental conversations had become their only reliable source of information. Aboard the Harmony, Dr. Minna watched the disaster unfold through her communication link with Tejo. Captain, we have to act now. The parasite is using the telepathic network to jump between minds. Soon it will control enough beings to take over the entire galactic government. Captain Dongwu made the most important decision of his life. All human ships, this is Dongwu. Execute the relay protocol immediately. We are going to cut the parasitic entity off from its food source. Across the sector, 12 human vessels moved into position at key points in the telepathic network. Each ship carried equipment designed by engineer Yu Jin that could create a barrier around telepathic communication hubs. The barriers would not stop telepathic communication completely, but they would filter out the parasitic infection. The plan was dangerous because it required human ships to position themselves directly in the path of the entity's expansion. If they failed, the corruption would spread even faster. Suran's light patterns appeared on the Harmony's communication screen. The young Vorthak's message was dim, but urgent. The darkness comes for the great hub now. Your people must be ready. We will help however we can. Dr. Minna realized that the Vorthak, who were still uncorrupted, could serve as early warning sensors. Their crystal bodies were sensitive to the parasitic entity's presence. Suran, can your people tell us exactly where the entity will strike? Next. Yes, we feel its hunger. It moves toward the Star Road Center. Your ship friends must make the barrier strong there. Communications Officer Jamin coordinated with the other human vessels. All ships report ready. Barrier generators are online, but Captain, these devices are experimental. We do not know if they will work. They have to work, Dongwu replied. If we fail, there might not be anyone left to try again. The first test came at the edge of Corvin space. A human cargo ship called New Hope positioned itself between a telepathic relay station and the advancing corruption. Engineer Yu Jin monitored the barrier readings from the Harmony. Barrier is holding, she reported. The parasitic energy is being deflected around the protected area. But the entity was learning. It began probing the barriers, looking for weaknesses. At the third relay station, it found one. The human ship, Perseverance, had an older barrier generator that could not handle the full force of the parasitic attack. Perseverance is reporting system failures, Jamin announced. Their barrier is collapsing. Dr. Minna had an idea. Suran, can you and the other uncorrupted Vorthak help strengthen our barriers? If you focus your natural crystal energy on the same frequency as our generators? The response came quickly. We try, but we are few now. The darkness has taken most of our people. Across Vorthak space, the remaining crystal beings focused their life energy into a coordinated effort. Their combined power flowed through space to strengthen the human barrier generators. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The barriers became stronger and more stable. At Nexus Prime, Ambassador Tejo worked to keep the Galactic Council functioning. Many members were now afraid to use telepathic communication at all, which meant they had to rely on spoken language and visual displays. This is actually working in our favor, Tejo told Council Leader Vex 9. Without telepathic interference, you can see the pure mathematical evidence of what is happening. The entity is real, and it is spreading through your communication network. The breakthrough came when Dr. Minna discovered something crucial about the parasitic entity. It could only exist by feeding on active telepathic connections. If all telepathic communication stopped for just a few hours, the entity would starve and collapse. But how do we coordinate a galaxy-wide communication shutdown? Captain Dongwu asked. The same way we have been doing everything else, Mina replied. Through human ships and Vorthak light pattern communication. We become the nervous system for the entire galaxy. The plan was ambitious beyond anything humans had ever attempted. Every human ship in the galaxy would serve as a communication relay, carrying messages between worlds using radio waves and visual signals. The Vorthak would provide additional relay points and help translate emotional content that pure technology could not handle. Ambassador Tejo presented the plan to the Galactic Council. For the next 6 hours, all telepathic species must stop using mental communication completely. Humans and Vorthak will maintain essential communications during this time. When the parasitic entity starves, you can safely reconnect. It was a moment of absolute trust. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy had to rely on the two species they had considered the most primitive: humans who could not use telepathy, and Vorthak who had been labeled as aggressive and dangerous. The shutdown began at exactly the same moment across hundreds of worlds. Telepathic beings fell silent for the first time in their species' history. Human ships carried messages between governments, military forces, and families. Vorthak survivors translated emotional content and provided early warnings about the entity's death throes. For 6 hours, the galaxy was held together by the species that had been outsiders and outcasts. When the telepathic networks came back online, they were clean. The parasitic entity was gone, starved out of existence. Suran's light patterns were the first message received by the restored system. The darkness is ended. Thank you for hearing us. Ambassador Tai-Ho stood before a changed galactic council. The crisis had taught every species a valuable lesson about the danger of depending on only one form of communication. More importantly, it had shown them the strength that came from diversity. The Vorthak will be welcomed back as honored members of our community, Council Leader Vex-9 announced, and humanity will take on a new role as guardians of galactic communication, ensuring that no species ever suffers in silence again. Dr. Mina smiled as she read Suran's final message. Your people have strange gift. You hear pain without sharing it. You understand suffering without feeling it. This makes you healers for all who hurt. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the greatest understanding came not from sharing the same language, but from caring enough to listen when someone was trying to speak. And humans, who had always been different, had shown that being different was exactly what the universe needed.